Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Gosztola, the managing editor, or was the managing editor of Shadowproof at one time, but now I'm the curator of the Dissenter newsletter. And if you think I'm like amped up, it's because we have this huge breaking news that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is going to be free finally. He has a plea deal. He has something we kind of scoffed at, didn't actually believe was probably possible. But again, as I've said before, I didn't think that Barack Obama was going to show mercy to Chelsea Manning and that she was going to walk free and serve only 6.5 to 7 years of her prison sentence. And now Julian Assange has a plea agreement, and we're going to get into it. But first, I have to introduce John Kiriakou, CIA officer, former CIA officer, and a whistleblower, friend, colleague. Welcome. I'm glad to be talking with you. And I'll have another colleague and friend who's going to join us soon to break this down, who some of you may know. But welcome, John. It's good to see you tonight.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Glad that I could be with you, of all people, to share this.
Yeah, and not that I need to be selling books at this moment, but I wrote Guilty of Journalism over here. We did an event together at Busboys and Poets, and I wrote this book imagining that there would be this major trial in the Eastern District of Virginia where you were prosecuted, and that I'd be coming and spending a long amount of time in the area, much like I did when covering Manning's court-martial at Fort Meade, Maryland. And we've averted it, and it's not going to happen. And that's a huge victory. I think, we're going to get into the specific details here. But before I do, first, let me welcome Chip Gibbons, who is you work for Defending Rights and Dissent. You're a policy director, correct? Did I get that right?
Policy director, yes. I've had many titles since I've known you, but I've landed a policy director.
Policy director. So here we are. We're catching up on this. This breaking news in the last hour. I have John to thank for giving me a phone call. I have Chip to thank for sending me an email. But I just gave you my general reaction. Chip, I'm going to throw it to John, and then we'll go to you. John, your reaction to this news before we get into specifics, your general reaction to this is the resolution.
Well, I think many of us thought that there would eventually be some sort of a resolution. I can't imagine anybody on the planet expected this resolution. This is coming out of the Federal District Court for the District of the Northern Marianas Islands. It's not coming from the Federal District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia, which is what we had all feared. So many of us, Chip and I have talked about this 1,000 million times, and certainly Kevin, you and I have, about the fact that Julian could not possibly have gotten a fair trial in the Eastern District of Virginia for myriad reasons that we've all written and spoken about. And so all of a sudden, what federal district court is the absolute geographically closest to Australia is the Northern Marianas Islands. And the plea deal has already been filed there. He would have to leave the UK like within hours, I'm thinking, in order to get there to enter his guilty plea. This plea is for one count of conspiracy under 18 U.S. 793G, I think is what it is.
Yeah, it is.
It's the Espionage Act, but he's not pleading guilty to espionage. He's pleading guilty to conspiracy. I would consider that to be a victory as well. And yeah, I mean, the conventional wisdom then is he'll take his plea, sign his paperwork, get back on the plane, and go home to his family in Australia.
Okay, let's put this up here just so people can see. This is the Marianas Islands that I said trench. This is the Marianas Islands that we're talking about. I've just got Encyclopedia Britannica here. Yes, it's off the coast of Australia. It's in the Pacific. This is only U.S. empire could make this possible.
Seriously.
So I'll take that down. Chip, your general reaction, having spent so much time covering this case.
It's a little bit surreal. I mean, I don't know if I'm totally convinced this is real yet. I'm waiting for someone to come in and say, "Wake up, Chip, you're dreaming," or this is some sort of bizarre miscommunication. I'm really happy for Julian Assange that he's going free. Obviously, I don't think this charge should ever have been brought against him. I don't think any of the charges should ever have been brought against him. I think it's important to note from a legal perspective that a plea deal does not set a legal precedent. So as far as I'm concerned, the charge he pled guilty to is still unconstitutional. But if he had gone to the Eastern District of Virginia and lost and appealed that defeat and lost at an appellate level, he would have set a precedent, a negative precedent for press freedom. So it is important to remember that while there is potentially a political precedent from this plea deal, there is no legal precedent here. And also, I mean, I guess don't publish classified information in the Northern Maran Islands is I guess the only legal takeaway here. But feel free to do so in the Northern Virginia. But as John mentioned, it is not one of the 3 pure publishing charges. The charge is for conspiracy to obtain and disclose. It alleges he conspired with Chelsea Manning. Obviously, that is a dumb accusation, and there are elements of it that criminalize the journalist-source relationship, and that a lot of the U.S. conspiracy allegations were as troubling as the pure publication allegations. In some cases, maybe even more troubling. But there is no precedent. He's going free. He hasn't been free in over a decade. He spent 5 years in Belmarsh, 7 years under arbitrary detention per the United Nations Working Group. That's not my opinion. It's a legal finding. And the Ecuadorian embassy. And I think before that, he was under house arrest, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's not been free for like
14 years.
14 years? 14
Crazy.
years. So
Yeah.
Julian is going free. This is a victory. I'm very glad I put off my getting my ticket to London till tomorrow.
Yeah.
You can't get a refund. You can't get a refund. You would, right? You would.
So you would have to pay a $225 fee. You could get a refund if you upgraded your ticket by $4,000, which is twice the cost of the ticket. So I decided, yeah. Anyway, so no, I will get a refund for my hotel room, but I need to cancel right now. I will not be staying in Holborn. Maybe I'll go on a celebratory vacation. I don't know.
You've gotten to the best part about this for me on a personal level is that I no longer have to try to get credentialed by His Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service over in London. I mean, it is absolutely insane what people have had to go through. I'm not going to get into specifics out of respect for privacy, but Italian journalist Stefania Marizzi, who was tried to do this without pulling her hair out, has consistently had difficulties getting confirmation that she would be allowed in court to cover. And then there are other people who have issues. Rebecca Vincent over at Reporters Without Borders has fought mightily as just a general observer to go and cover on behalf of a press freedom organization. Human rights organizations have had so much difficulty. The lack of openness, fairness, and just transparency on the part of the UK courts should go down in history as just one of the most despicable parts of what they allowed to happen in their country at the behest of the United States.
I mean, the access issues for the media at the February hearing would be a international scandal if we were not talking about extraditing a journalist to a country that tried to assassinate him. Like the level of abuses are just so great. They cancel out so many other abuses, I guess. I mean, it is just...
You know, may I add something to this too?
Yeah.
This is actually politically, this is a little more complicated than I think even I had realized. I spoke to somebody very close to Julian just a few days ago, and I said, in advance of the what would have been the July 9th and 10th appeal hearing, I said, well, you've got to be looking forward to the British national elections on July 4th, because it's going to be, by all accounts, an epic, maybe historic win by the Labour Party. And this person said, actually, we're not that excited about it, because the faction of the Labour Party that's going to win, the Keir Starmer party, or Keir Starmer faction, is anti-Assange. And they refuse to, at the time, they refused to come down on the side of then what would be a further appeal to the European Court of Human Rights. We all know that even though the UK has withdrawn from the European Union, they're still signatories to the European Court of Human Rights, but then refused to go on the record as saying that they would respect a decision there were it to be in Julian's favor. And I said, this guy can't win. It's like there's no good news. There's never any good news.
John,
and then this happened.
Can I add in a factoid? Keir Starmer was head of the Crown Prosecution Service during the Swedish exile.
Oh,
and
for God's sake.
He was head of the prosecution when they destroyed all the documents.
Oh, my God. See, I didn't even know that. That's even worse.
Has been courageously exposing that through her. I think she calls it FOIA trench warfare. I think that is the best description I've ever heard in my life. FOIA trench warfare. I think I sent her an email. I think she's probably in bed right now. She's going to wake up. I just got back from the gym and was taking a shower. I had my phone had blown up. And I'm like, why is everyone calling me? And I said, oh, Julian insisted a plea deal. I'm like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't.
You're joking.
And I clicked on the link and I'm like, oh, he did. Like,
crazy.
Stop calling me. This isn't true. What are you doing? Great. And it's true. And it's great news. I want the focus right now to be on the fact that after 14 years, Julian will be a free man, that the country that tried to kill him will not get to imprison him. And then we can, tomorrow and the day after, reflect on how odious it is that they would not drop their Espionage Act charges, even in a plea deal.
Yeah.
Whatever he pled to. He gets to go free. Why make him plead to 793G? I mean, that is ugly. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just read what you're referring to here, which is the court document. You said it, but for those who are joining us, as this is breaking news, we have the filing. First of all, we don't really have to rely on the way the New York Times or NBC News or any other publication is framing this. But this is what it says in the court document. In the Northern Mariana Islands, the defendant, Julian Paul Assange, was not a United States citizen, did not possess a U.S. security clearance, did not have authorization to possess, access, or control documents, writings, or notes relating to the national defense of the United States, including United States government classified information. And then it says Chelsea Manning was a United States Army intelligence analyst who held a top secret U.S. security clearance, who was deployed to Forward Operating Base Hammer in Iraq. It's a 793G conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defense information. As Chip and John have been saying, this is not a publication charge. This is also, it would appear, as I look at this, that are we still going with, it looks like did they drop the part of the password cracking? I don't see that in here.
Yeah, they dropped it.
CFA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's no computer fraud, which again, if you are looking for a way to plead out, I don't think Julian Assange violated the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Nobody is saying so. But if you're looking for a way to plead out, he already had maxed out the sentence for that in time served. It doesn't have as grave as press freedom implications. I disagree with some of the press freedom groups who won't touch the CFAA, because having sat in that courtroom in London, there was a narrative about press freedom there that's a lot worse than I think people realize. But that would have been the route I would have seen the U.S. government going.
Mm-hmm.
I never really bought the thing the Wall Street Journal put forward, that he would plead guilty under aiding and abetting liability to mishandling classified information. I mean, that's such a bizarre
Yeah.
But then so is aiding and abetting somebody who had authorized access to the information, giving somebody that does. That was also a bizarre charge. So it did follow from 2 or 3 of the charges. I don't have every one of the 17 counts memorized. I have a cheat sheet that I use. I didn't have time to pull up because this happened and right now. But I don't know. I'm surprised by what the charge is in the plea. I'm disappointed in the U.S. government, although I'm usually disappointed in the U.S. government. But I am so happy Julian's going free.
Me too.
So let me just, for the few people that are chiming in, I see some comments, and I want to be able, since we have some informed experts, all 3 of us have paid this closely, to just respond to some things that are, random stray thoughts, but worth just establishing. One of the things that has been a struggle all along is we don't have consistent establishment or prestige media coverage of the case. So it's easy for people to get confused about details. So we have Ethan saying, why does the doc only mention Manning stuff? I thought they only began prosecuting after Vault 7. Well, just as a matter of fact, the Vault 7 publications, which are hacking materials from the CIA, were never part of the case. Mm-hmm. And it is worth saying, just to hold people accountable who had justified and defended prosecuting Julian Assange, that there was never anything to do with what Julian Assange allegedly did with the documents about Clinton campaign or the DNC, that people made up some narrative that he got them directly from the Russian government or a cutout for the Russian government. But that was never even a part of this case. And my understanding is it would not have even been brought up in a trial, save for maybe in sentencing.
So Julian was sued by the Democratic National Committee. Civil courts have a lower standard of evidence than criminal courts. You only have to find by preponderance of the evidence that's more likely than not, as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt. In the civil suit, the judge dismissed the case against Wikileaks, stating it was absolutely in their First Amendment right to publish the Clinton emails. Robert Mueller, a liberal folk hero, serial abuser of civil rights and liberal folk hero, he investigated this, and he did not. It was originally redacted in the original Mueller report, but I believe through Jason Leopold, it came out through FOIA. He said you could not charge Julian Assange or WikiLeaks over the DNC hacks unless you could prove they were complicit in the hacking and knew about it, which they didn't have evidence of. Assuming there was hacking, I know some people still dispute that. I'm not going there. It's not germane to Julian's liability one way or the other, whether it's hacked or not. And that because the First Amendment gives you the right to publish illegally obtained materials. So even if the materials were illegally obtained, Julian Assange could not be prosecuted for them. And the Clinton emails are undeniably not national defense information. The exception to the rule about publishing illegally obtained materials is possibly the Espionage Act. Most presidents or most administrations have interpreted the Espionage Act as not being applicable if you're the publisher because of that precedent about journalists being allowed to publish illegally obtained materials so long as they didn't illegally obtain them themselves. However, the letter of the Espionage Act would certainly criminalize that behavior and has never been tested in court. And I don't want to test it in court, to be honest.
May I interrupt?
Of course.
I'm looking at a video of Julian getting on an airplane at Stansted Airport. He's clean shaven. His hair is thin. He put on a few pounds. He looks amazing. Walking onto the airplane. The airplane is preparing to depart right now. And I just got a text from his mom saying that the family is preparing a statement, and God bless everybody for their support.
He's on the airport in the Northern Mariners Island, or
no, he's in London at Stansted.
Okay.
See this here. I'm going to put it up. Let's play this. This is amazing. But first, before we show the image, this is from WikiLeaks. Julian Assange is free. Julian Assange is free. He left Belmarsh Maximum Security Prison on the morning of 24th June after having spent 1,901 days there. He was granted bail by the High Court in London and was released at Stansted Airport during the afternoon, where he boarded a plane and departed the UK. He's already on a plane then. This is a result.
It's gone.
Of a global campaign that spanned grassroots organizers, press freedom campaigners, legislators, and leaders from across the political spectrum, all the way to the United Nations. So that was all of us. Congratulations to all of us.
Seriously.
We all did this.
Congratulations.
This created the space for a long period of negotiations with the U.S. Department of Justice, leading to a deal that has not yet been formally finalized. Well, actually, it kind of has, but
yeah, it's been filed.
We will provide more information as soon as possible. After more than 5 years in a 2x3 meter cell, isolated 23 hours a day, he will soon reunite with his wife, Stella Assange, and their children, who have only known their father from behind bars. It's Gabriel and Max. WikiLeaks published groundbreaking stories of government corruption and human rights abuses, holding the powerful accountable for their actions. As editor-in-chief, Julian paid severely for these principles and for the people's right to know. As he returns to Australia, we thank all who stood by us, fought for us, and remained utterly committed in the fight for his freedom. Julian's freedom is our freedom. And then, if you can just give me a second, I'll switch this over and we'll show the video of him. This is him free. I mean, this is absolutely incredible. Julian Assange outside of prison.
Crazy. Can't believe it.
Boarding the jet.
It's just crazy. My brain can't wrap itself around what's happening.
Well, it's great. It's great to spend the evening with you. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I would like to just see if there's anything else that people wanted us to clarify before we would, stop talking. Obviously, there's going to be some time to learn about details, the machinery, how it got to this point, what made the Biden administration back down. We can speculate, but I mean, do either of you have any thoughts about why they were willing to accept a plea deal finally?
I'm not a Biden fan. I've never been a Biden fan. I didn't like him when he was in the Senate. But I don't think there was as much political will in the political part of this administration as there was at the security services. When the former national security U.S. attorney for Eastern District went out under the Trump administration, he predicted Biden would drop it. I think this case has been pushed forward by the FBI, National Security Division, the CIA. CIA is the big one, but I think the FBI deserves blame here as well, especially since we know that they were still interviewing potential witnesses. So they were planning to come. And we know the FBI sent over potential charges to Obama, and that the FBI and the CIA requested a meeting with Obama, tried to get him to reverse the decision not to prosecute Julian. So people rightfully blame the CIA, but as someone who's been working on a book on the FBI for like 3-4 years now, please don't forget about the FBI also being bad. They're pretty terrible. Especially the National Security Division. So I do think there was a lack of enthusiasm for this, for the political part of the administration. In the career national security part of it, I think they would see this to the very end. I think if they could, they would still be prosecuting him.
Couldn't agree more. I think Chip has that 100% right. This was being pushed by the national security apparatus. This was all about face saving, and it was about punishing him to frighten anybody else who might be considering releasing information that makes them look bad. If it were up to the FBI and the CIA, this thing would go until Julian died of old age in solitary confinement somewhere.
They're hateful.
And if I had to guess, because we're going to see tomorrow the spokespeople for the Biden administration answer this. I mean, particularly, I only have one way to describe this person after what they've been doing during the genocidal violence in Gaza, and that's Matthew Miller being this absolute ghoul about everything. related to what's been unfolding. If I had to, he had actually defended the prosecution against Julian Assange several weeks ago, regurgitated the alleged computer crime allegations. He regurgitated those. It was Ryan Grimm who asked him about the Assange case, and what he got was this boilerplate nonsense that the State Department first came up with, I'm convinced, in 2010, 2011, when they were responding to the cables that were being published, because they really have the same thing that they say over and over again. So we're going to hear from them. They're going to say what they have to say about this. Karina Jean-Pierre is probably going to make some kind of a comment. And I bet what they say is, well, he was held accountable. He was in prison for 5 years at Belmarsh. Look at what he did go through. It does send a message that you don't publish U.S. secrets. This is what happens to you if you violate classified information of the United States, right? Isn't that what we're going to probably hear?
Oh, definitely. They're going to call this a victory. They're going to call this a victory for law and order and the rule of law and all kinds of nonsensical bullshit. But the truth is that this is a victory for Julian Assange. This is a victory for grassroots movements in favor and support of transparency. And, I think this is a big win for all of us. I really do. For all of us who care about civil rights and civil liberties and human rights, we won this thing.
Yeah. Well, let me just make sure I don't leave anybody hanging, and I'll let you run off. You've got people to talk to. I know you've had a chance previously, John, to meet Julian Assange. I know that you met him in the embassy. So
no, I couldn't get in. So we had to do it over the phone.
You talked to him over the phone. Okay.
Yeah. Number of times.
Well, let me just take a moment, because we just marked the anniversary of Daniel Ellsberg's death, to just honor him and say how big of a moment it is right now, and that Dan would have been so ecstatic to learn that Julian Assange was walking free. I mean, this was a major part of Dan Ellsberg's life, and he endorsed my book, and I got a chance to talk to him about Julian Assange just a few months before he died from pancreatic cancer. He regularly spoke with Julian Assange, and Julian Assange lost somebody who was a mentor and father figure. And that was part of his detention at Belmarsh that flew under the radar. But people should know, the people who left Julian Assange, who passed on and were no longer able to be in his corner fighting. Michael Ratner, human rights attorney, who was a core... What?
Kevin Zeese passed on too.
Kevin Zeese
was very big in the U.S. Assange.
The UK, Matt Kennard would talk about Gavin McFadden.
Yeah,
that's right.
Was a big supporter of journalism and a big supporter of WikiLeaks.
John Pilger.
John Pilger, just this year, right? A couple or 2 or 3 months ago. And of course, we thought Noam Chomsky had died last week, but he's apparently hanging on and still with us. So we're really glad. And we hope that he's getting this news, and I hope he's lucid, and I hope he can respond to how great it is that Julian Assange is walking free, because Noam and Dan and some of these other people had done Assange defense campaign events. And I was honored to be able to interact and work with them, as I know both of you were. Anything you want to say in final words before I turn off this stream?
I'll just say one word about Dan. I mean, Dan was a phenomenal person in every imaginable way. His dedication to making the world a better place, his selflessness. But one of the things I always noted about Daniel Ellsberg was that he had such a sense of personal investment and compassion in other people who were going through what he went through with the
yeah.
Espionage Act. I witnessed it firsthand when this is before he had cancer, he was still quite sick. He did a press conference for Daniel Hale. No one thought he was going to show up because he had a doctor's appointment. He showed up. It was on Zoom in a full suit. The left doesn't usually show up in suits, so that was very impressive. And, Kevin and I were doing a webinar with him the night he learned about one of Chelsea Manning's attempts on her life. And he was so distraught when he heard. I will never forget that. So it meant he would be so personally happy right now. It meant so much on a personal level. You could really feel it when you were with him. He absolutely felt a tremendous sense of compassion. And I'm sad he's not here to see this, although he'd also have to see what was going on in Gaza and with our governments. So yeah, I'm glad.
Okay, so Tom Drake has a comment. I just want to work him in because NSA whistleblower who got the Espionage Act brought down on him definitely deserves to be part of this live reaction, as does anybody who has been a victim or survivor of an Espionage Act prosecution today. Is for you, because this is avoiding the worst consequences. This is avoiding expanding it to a degree that would forever endanger journalism. And it was only because of the pushback of us. So here's Tom, and I'm going to cover up Chip, and we'll lose you momentarily. But Tom Drake is saying, it's a relief to hear that Julian Assange is flying to his freedom after all these many years. Kudos to countless people named and unnamed that led to his freedom. Reminds me of my own last minute on the eve of trial plea deal. That was my own off ramp from trial after 5+ years under a draconian NatSec investigation, prosecution. Does not appear to set any negative precedent for espionage against a journalist. I'm sure additional details will follow. And we're all looking forward to whatever officials can say to spin it. As somebody else mentions, Daniel Hale, I'm anxious to see what he thinks, because I know while he was in his communications management unit in Illinois the whole time, he's following developments in the Assange case through people like Chip and me and others who are reporting on Julian Assange. And he's wondering, is Julian Assange going to be coming here to this communications management unit? And was dreading that Julian Assange would be there because he would not be allowed to hug his kids or kiss his wife ever if they visited him in the United States.
Yes. I want to make one final comment, and that is that that the fight's not over for any of us. The fight really, it began a long time ago. It began in modern times for us with Dan Ellsberg, God rest his soul. But just because Julian's free doesn't mean we all get to take a vacation now. This fight is never going to end. Not until the Espionage Act is rewritten, or let me rephrase that. Not until Chip's draft of the new Espionage Act is adopted. It's the only one I've ever seen that contains sanity and actually goes after people who spy for foreign governments, which ought to be the point of the Espionage Act in the first place. So, let's take a day and celebrate and wish Julian and his extended family the very best. But we have to pick up the fight again the very next day.
You're absolutely right. And there's been evidence within the United States of attacks on freedom of the press. And to summarize that, this creep where journalists get in trouble, there's a case in Florida right now people should know about involving Timothy Burke, who has been indicted for, it says in the indictment that they've gone after him for scouring the internet for items that could be considered news. Basically, I mean that's what he did. He went around looking for it. He found something that he believed was newsworthy. we need to be in tune with this. There's been raids happening, police and or FBI raids against journalists that have been taking place, especially in the more like sparse or rural communities of the United States. We've been seeing that people just break into newsrooms and start, grabbing stuff. It's like, and I feel like this is filtering from the top on down, that like police in these smaller jurisdictions in the US, in places that, if you're in London or Sydney, Australia, you never even heard about, you don't know what we're talking about. But it's just like they are of the mindset that they can just come into a newsroom, take people's computers, hard drives, devices, whatever. And it can, and we're talking about things like personal vendettas. Like, we're going to settle scores by going in and raiding this journalist because we don't like that they printed a story about someone who had a DUI or something like that. And I think that is under the umbrella of this attack on freedom of the press that Julian Assange represented. And then if you look globally, if I can just get this out before I say goodbye to you tonight, if you look globally, you look at, the Israeli government censoring these organizations, censoring Al Jazeera, and saying that, they can just boot them off the airwave, declare them as this terrorism channel, this incitement to terrorism channel. So then it means that any organization that does work with Al Jazeera is now an accessory to terrorism. The AP found that they had their equipment confiscated one day because they're showing images of Gaza and then they're sharing those images with Al Jazeera. And it's just like, this is a part of what we're fighting. We're fighting this global metastasization of treating journalism as if it is supporting violence or like it's part of a conspiracy against governments. And I said all along that I was opposed to what was happening with Evan Gershkovich in Russia, who has been detained. They say without any evidence that he worked for the CIA. And I could not, throughout this entire Assange case, prevent myself from thinking that Evan Gershkovich's case was basically like a mirror image of Julian Assange's case, where in this case, the CIA is saying that the Julian Assange worked for Russia. Based in their minds. That's what Mike Pompeo said. And so that's why they needed to go after Julian Assange.
Absolutely right.
All right. Well, John Kiriakou, everybody, former CIA officer and also a radio host, does great work on whistleblowers and prisons. And then here's Chip, a good friend and colleague, and he writes for Jacobin. He does reporting. Not going to be going to London after all. Doesn't have to.
Can't leave my hotel.
Neither do I. I don't have to bother about ever traveling to cover a royal court again for right now until there's some other Espionage Act case that they try to extradite somebody. But it's been good spending the evening with you, John and Chip, and talking to everyone out there. And we'll catch up some more later. But until then, thank you for tuning in and supporting my work. And I will see you all later. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.